I read in the paper that there was this supposed exploration of a mysterious cave system deep in the woods outside of town. As I've recently needed a repose from my writing, I tend to get lost in my writing for days at a time, so some fresh air will do nicely. I hopped on the soonest bus and head out immediately to see what this cave was all about. When I arrived at the cave entrance, the tour guide was on the stump of a redwood tree, trying to round up the crew, as he stated. Alrighty folks, welcome to Silencio cave system, said to be the quietest place here on Earth. So quiet it can drive someone a little crazy if they stay in there for too long. My name's Ainsley, and I'll be your tour guide today. I only have one rule for y'all to follow. Stick to me like butter on toast. I don't want anyone getting lost like last time. Like last time? What do you mean, like last time? Don't you mind that now, Failer? Let's start heading to the caves. As he turned around, I noticed he had a deagle stowed away in a holster on his right side. I stayed silent, but was very skeptical of the authenticity of that newspaper article, and grew increasingly nervous as we approached the huge mouth of the cave system. I prayed while I was roaming down in the depths of that cave that I'd one day be able to see the light of day again. I continued to walk a seemingly endless labyrinth, attempting to retrace my steps from a few hours ago. I quite distinctly remember that I was with my group following my overly energetic tour guide, attempting to pass on that misguided enthusiasm to his tour goers. It was for that reason, and that reason alone, I decided to deviate from the group. I thought I had merely walked a few feet away from my group. But before I noticed, I turned around, and there was no one there. Not even a flashlight to be seen. As the last rays of my flashlight faded into murky darkness, I decided to leave no stone unturned, no potential means of escape ignored. So summoning all the strength in my lungs, I yelled till the veins in my forehead seemed to pop out, waiting to see if my guide would return. Yet, as I called, I believed that my calls really had no purpose, my screeches only magnified and reflected by the black maze around me, and fell upon no ears but my own. However, my ears snapped to the faintest of sounds nearby. As I have been the only one in this cave, all the previous sounds were mine, and mine alone. Yet I swore I heard the sound of soft approaching steps on the rocky floor of the cavern. Was I saved? Did my guide come back for me? Whilst these numerous questions arose in my brain, I was at the point of screaming it again, in order for my guide to come quicker, when in an instant, my delight was turned to horror as I listened. To my numbed understanding, the unexpected and horrid idea that these steps were not of a man. In the unearthly silence of this labyrinth, the footsteps of the guide would have sounded like a set of sharp blows to the soil below. Those of a man wearing boots, perhaps. These impacts were soft and stealthy, as if a lion were slowly observing its pride land. Besides, at times, when I listened carefully, I seemed to hear 2 steps instead of 4. Yet my sense of self-preservation hadn't strayed just yet. I felt as quiet as the caves around me, in the hope that whatever that creature was would pass if it wasn't guided by sound. However, I noticed that as soon as I went silent, so did the ominous footsteps coming from a few yards away. As not to get caught out by some sort of unexpected attack, I armed myself with the largest stones I could find nearby. As I did this, the footsteps started moving again, moving closer, moving slightly faster than before. I decided in the heat of the moment that I need to act first before whatever this thing was could come any closer. So I began to throw the rocks I had collected in the general area where the footsteps were coming from. 1 rock, 2 rock, 3 rock, all landing with a hefty thud on the dusty cavern floor. On the 4th toss, I must have hit the anonymous creature, because when I tossed the rock, an unearthly screech came from where I tossed it. I then heard those very footsteps slowly pitter-pattering away. I really must have done some damage to the creature based on the sound of the creature's walk. It certainly sounded like it had a limp of sorts. As the footsteps became more and more distant, I heard another set of footsteps approaching from behind. Upon hearing the second set of footsteps, I immediately turned 180 degrees and started throwing the rest of my rocks, in fear that the previous creature wasn't working alone. After throwing the first few rocks, I focused on the steps once more. Unlike the earlier steps, however, these footsteps sounded significantly different. Unlike the soft tread of earlier, this was more rugged sounding, like incisions being carefully cut into the soil. I immediately knew that this was my tour guide, my savior. I never had been more happy to see anyone in my life. I threw myself at his shoes, clutching to his legs, like a child clutches to his parent, seeking safety from their fears.
Excuse me, sir, but are you okay?
Oh, thank God. Thank the Lord. I thought I was gonna die down here, man. I had to fight off something. I was so scared. What was that thing? It was so dark. I couldn't see a thing.
Now, what exactly do you mean by you saw something? There's absolutely nothing down here.
I went down here before the tour to double check nothing was...
Oh, shit. Get behind me.
As he said that, my ears picked up the unmistakable padding of the steps from a few moments ago. The tour guide whipped out his deagle and unloaded all 6 shots into the unknown entity. Ears ringing and in a daze, we walked over to the slumped-over mass of darkness the tour guide had just shot. Yet, as we approached the thing, we started to notice that this wasn't any sort of creature we had ever seen before. By the time we arrived, the guide's face had turned just as white as the creature's, his eyes as wide as the creature's. Yet what horrified us more was that this was in fact not a creature at all. It was a man. A man that was so deformed he couldn't even be considered a man anymore. Oh God, he was so deformed, so pale. And his eyes were so black and wide, so dark, so round, almost falling out of his head. I can't get this image out of my head.